Hello, everyone, and welcome to Higher Perspectives. Today, I'd like to dive into the marketplace and currency and how feminine energy in particular has changed the nature of what we understand as commerce today. Secondly, I want to speak to how successful professional women are often unsatisfied with their outcomes and why that is, energetically speaking. And finally, how you can increase the flow of currency in your own life. So as many of you may know, corporations started in the 1800s based on the 14th Amendment, which was meant to support slaves after they were freed. And lawyers made it their business to create business or corporations through that amendment so that corporations could do their business only with the benefit of their shareholders in mind. They had no other loyalty to any other stakeholder. And everything that has been done to date in terms of how corporations act towards their stakeholders have been band-aided on through regulation or have been recognized by corporations as society's preferences and priorities that they have to reflect in order to be considered for their products and services over other corporations. So it's a strategic advantage to value what society values, in particular today, because of the transparency that happens with technology. But what really happened is that it probably wasn't until the 1970s and really the 80s when women began to be part of the corporate landscape and the marketplace landscape. Until then, really, maybe except for Rosie the Riveter during World War II, women were given roles of support to the men. And because this paradigm was architected by men, for men, and about men, and there was never an expectation that any other person would be involved in this, then the ecosystem evolved to accommodate that. And when women entered the conversation in the 70s, mostly starting in the 80s, they began to become better and better men so that they could then advance in that paradigm. It wasn't until Sally Helgeson wrote a book called The Female Advantage in the 1990s, and it was the first time that anyone had considered women to have something to contribute that might be valuable outside of just aligning themselves with the masculine paradigm that they encountered when they came into corporations or companies. And so that along with other regulations, including creating regulations against a hostile work environment, and probably 4 regulations for equal pay, which we're still working on today, that haven't quite been implemented. But there's band-aids through regulation that have had to say, well, if we are going to accommodate these people that were never intended to be in this model, we're going to have to create regulations and say, hey, model, you have to open and allow this, open and allow this. And so that's how things got done. And it usually got done by lawsuits and the economic outcomes when someone was sued, which would allow them to change the corporate behavior. And so over time, it has been the feminine energy. And again, I'll go back to what I said in last week's video, that the technology is distinctly feminine in the way that it operates, because it's concerned with connection and it's prioritizing connection over outcome. You can make any outcome you want, but it's got to have the integrity of the connection so that it is that it has value. And so our definition of value, what we value and how we value it, has changed because of feminine energy. When microloans, as so many know now, when microloans, Mohammed Yunus in India made microloans to women, it was a time when women could not own property. It was a time when women were not considered worthy recipients of any kind of financial consideration. In fact, women paid back those loans 98% of the time, and what they did with the money that they received from their successful investment was that they reinvested it in things that were better for the community. And they found that that happened more often than when men were given the same profits for their efforts and they kept them. So the whole gets better with feminine energy, because the feminine, when you look at the biology of the female, the hemispheres of both sides of the brain are working more integratively than they are in the masculine. The women have this biology to have children, and it biologically wires women to the invisible, to the value of the invisible, to the need to tune into the invisible, to the need to sense the development of that, the patience to accept and allow for the development of what is not her, but is also important for her and to her, and in which she needs to be involved. Whether or not women actually have children, they're biologically wired to be more sensitive to the invisible. So when you take that consciousness to the corporation, you find out that women begin to value the process. And it was before even technology became the organizing principle of all of business, really, that women began to influence, that teams were considered to be important, and self-organizing teams and self-directed teams, and those sort of movements became, the feminine energy became part of that influence of that, to the point where we start to look at even the GDP and how we evaluate what we count in the economy. And recently the United Nations came out with the economy of care, talking about how the care economy, and how we have to count what women have done in caregiving and the social services as part of the way that the economy is going to flow. It has always flown that way, but flowed that way, but not given credit, and how it must be counted in the future. So feminine energy has taken this from discrete hierarchical roles and responsibilities where people are rewarded for the bottom line. And sometimes the values were that it didn't matter if you were a rainmaker in a company and you made money, then you really got to flaunt any of the values. You got to bypass anyone and act any way you wanted to, as long as you kept making the company money. The advent of the feminine energy said, oh no, mission, vision, values. That happened between 1995 and 2005, where they suddenly, companies started to talk about that, and then talk about their distinct identity within a mission and vision and values that they all had to adhere to. Some paid lip service, but in the distinctly feminine energy, it said it's important to care about the relationships and the quality of those relationships that contribute to that bottom line, not just to get to the bottom line, and who cares how you got there, and who cares who was hurt along the way. So the marketplace changed as a result of this influence. And then, of course, technology, as I said last time, the democratization of information, where everyone has access to it, became a critical point where we could then say we have to be collaborative. We can't just look from the top down. That paradigm in the marketplace has been changing over time. Let me get to my second point. Right now, sometimes I find that my clients and professional women, even C-suite or leaders, they're successful and they're exhausted. And what has become clear is that since women did not author or architect the entire marketplace corporate culture, they're still band-aiding and working in and around it. I have literally seen women who have been, in today's world, have been promoted to very high positions because they've become very good men, the way that men would look at a situation, or the way that the hierarchy would reward it. And they are then celebrated because they're women in that position. That's a very, very different thing than if women are sitting on the leadership board of creating the culture, the conscious culture, which mindfulness and collaboration and honoring each person's diversity and the value of that. That's all feminine energy, to the point where we now have all of these instruments on the NASDAQ that we can vote with our values. For example, the Women Fund that was put together by YWCA and Dory McWhorter and her team. It's the first time in history that nonprofits have had access to the capital markets. Why? Because the advisory fee when you invest in this Woman Fund, which represents a portfolio of companies, 200 companies that do well on the gender lens, and how they accommodate, invite in, and support women in the workplace, because it's shown that when that happens, the bottom line gets richer and is more profitable. So in that portfolio, you can invest in that because you believe in that is true, that women should be supported. And by the way, so does the company get better because of it. And the advisory fee, when you do that, goes back to the YWCA, which then gets to expand their mission by helping people to understand how to value that diverse voice in the decision-making, et cetera. So that is how the model has moved, and how it's adapted, and how conscious business and conscious leadership and mindfulness got into the hallowed halls of the hierarchy of business. And that, again, the technology that supports all of that in mobilization and its ability to be mobile, and you can work from anywhere. And the pandemic really reinforced that. But when women have still been inching their way through this model that they did not author or architect, and because of the legal aspects, they get to have certain privileges, which may or may not be implemented in certain companies. Sometimes when they're successful, they feel exhausted because the breadth and depth of what they know naturally, their style of leadership, is not supported, and the culture is not conducive to forwarding that intelligence. And so they're exhausted. They're very successful in a model they didn't author, and then they're trying to change it. And then the transformational work is on top of the leadership work. So there's all kinds of reasons why when women are successful in business, they're often exhausted. Now, what's happening and where we're moving again in 2025 is we've made so much progress in this area that it is time to begin to make a new model of business entirely. Now that we have AI as the basis, being a partner with us in beginning to say, how do we do something better that would have taken us weeks or months and now can be done in seconds because of the ability of chat GPT, never mind the 3 and 4.0, they're coming out with 5.0, and it will be an enormous change and a shift, so that our knowledge and all of the energy that we've put into saying that here's my experience that I've spliced and diced, I can put that into a decision with a team. We'll work on it for a few months and come up with something. Well, that's no longer relevant in business. We will have bots doing that. So what is the value of what we bring, and how do we create a marketplace that values diverse voices, that values collaboration, that values innovation that comes from the diversity of those possibilities, those teams and those different people, and has yet a structure, an infrastructure that allows some discipline, that allows some accountability, and it allows us to really understand how we get from A to B to get to the bottom line, and also values the relationships within it. All of that is because now the feminine and masculine paradigm and energies are coming together to integrate towards greater unity. Then it allows us again to have these possibilities for creating our own companies, to create our own businesses as our purpose calls us to do. So we don't have to find that it'll take a lot of money and time and investment and VCs to compete with a company, that in fact we have this low barriers to entry so that we can compete because we have an idea that's of value to a community and that the community is looking for. We have lots of more models on how to monetize those, and those will be increasing in the future. And so our whole model of business is going to change. It's not going to be band-aided until it works in a different way. It will be changed because AI will allow us to bring a whole new intelligence and support into our companies. And all we've learned from the feminine energy and all we've learned from the intelligence of that masculine foundation all have to be put together in 2025 and beyond, so that we can accommodate this new world that we're all moving into, so that all our voices are heard and all of us are valued. And finally, how do you increase currency in your own life? One of my clients, Megan Poe, had this wonderful quote and she said that currency flows at the speed of trust. And I love this quote because the more we trust ourselves and that we're in alignment with what feels resonant to our truth and resonant to our gifts and our joy, the more we move in that direction, the more we trust ourselves as we take those steps, no matter how challenging it is. And it will be challenging because life isn't all about getting from A to Z. We've learned through this that there's value even in the mistakes. There's value in the difficult times. We learn things about ourselves that make us richer and more able to stand in our power, so that when we take the next step, we can reinforce the support we have to manifest what we want in the expression of our own unique love and our purpose. And so as we trust ourselves in that, and we take those steps, and we trust even when the journey is difficult, that we have a community to rely on, that there's nobody out there that has done this from A to Z without any pain and without any challenges. And we have lots of stories that can help support us. And then we trust the process, which is the feminine, and we get when we get concrete help, masculine, we get these disciplined frameworks and models, and we can find our way with those as well. Then currency will begin to flow in a way that supports this currency exchange. And the currency exchange of joy is a higher vibration, as I said last time, than the efforting and the belief that the world's against me and that no matter what I do, it won't work. And as you'll find from these future YouTube's presentations that I do, when you find yourself stuck in a particular area, when you find that you have a persistent challenge, in my work as a mystic, I will tell you that there is treasure under those persistent challenges. There is a treasure to be mine for your own soul's journey. And that's the interesting thing about it. From a mystic's perspective, business is a theater for the soul. It's just a way to express love from your purpose. And when when you find the challenges, it's when you can find that real treasure underneath, when you stay with and befriend some of those challenges rather than run away from them, cover them up, or pretend they're not important or not there. And then you can, again, stand in your power, learn about how to keep your boundaries strong, go into your center, and unequivocally trust, so that currency can continue to flow for you. I hope this was helpful for you, and I hope that you'll join me next week. If you really like what's going on with Higher Perspectives, please subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.